So much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Lots to get to on a busy Monday. We want to begin this half hour in the Middle East. Iranian state television confirms its president died in a helicopter crash. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, his death shocks the Iranian regime while at war with Israel.
Iran's supreme leader appointed first vice president Mohammad Makber as the country's acting president after Raisi's death. Iran's cabinet also announced they would continue the policies of Raisi. According to a TV state report, Raisi's helicopter crashed in bad weather after returning from inaugurating a dam in Iran's East Azerbaijan province. Iran's foreign minister also died in the crash. The crash comes after months of war between Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, and Iran's unprecedented drone and missile attack in April. Raisi is known as the Butcher of Tehran for his involvement in sentencing thousands of political opponents to death in the 1980s after the Islamic Revolution. During his term as president, he suppressed massive protests against the regime and also oversaw Iran's nuclear program get closer to weapons-grade uranium than ever. And he was an implacable foe of Israel, but Israel is denying any involvement in his death. Also in Israel, Benny Gantz, a member of the war cabinet, publicly issued an ultimatum to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Gantz said his party would leave the government by June 8th unless Netanyahu will launch a comprehensive plan for the day after the war with Hamas ends, including a governing body in Gaza with international and Palestinian personnel. Netanyahu fired back, accusing Gantz of issuing an ultimatum to the Prime Minister instead of issuing an ultimatum to Hamas, and saying Gantz's demands would mean an end to the war and defeat for Israel, abandoning the majority of the hostages, leaving Hamas in power and creating a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's coalition can't survive, even if Gantz's party leaves. Amid the political turmoil, thousands gathered on Saturday night in Tel Aviv demanding new elections and Netanyahu's resignation. The IDF also announced they recovered the bodies of 4 Israelis murdered by Hamas. They also released video of former hostage 8-year-old Ella Eliakim while in Hamas captivity.
The video, which is being released today for the first time, had intended to be used by Hamas for psychological terror. But Ella's family asked us to share it with the world, to expose Hamas's terror, to expose Hamas's cruelty, to expose Hamas's barbarism.
At the Knesset, Representative Elise Stefanik of New York, the 4th-ranking Republican in the House, delivered a speech before Israel's parliament on Sunday, promising to support Israel and combat anti-Semitism.
As long as I serve the American people, I will defend George Washington's vision of religious pluralism and freedom. Today, this means crushing anti-Semitism at home and supplying the state of Israel with what it needs, when it needs it, without conditions to achieve total victory in the face of evil.
It's on Iran and what comes next in that country, and what it means for Israel and the Middle East.
And Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem with more. Chris, let's begin with this. You mentioned in your report that Iran's president was killed in a crash. What does this mean for Israel and the Middle East?
Well, Ephraim, we will see, obviously, but perhaps some say not as much as you would expect. The ultimate policy is in the hands of Khamenei, the supreme leader. And as we stated in our report, the cabinet said Raisi's policies will remain the same. The temporary successor, he's also a close confidant of Khamenei. But talking about Raisi himself, he was called the Butcher of Tehran for a reason. He slaughtered about 1,500 during a 2019 revolt. Apparently, he personally raped women in the prisons. And it was in 1988 when he ordered executions of thousands of political opposition. And so he was in the line, actually, for the next position of supreme leader. And many are hoping, Ephraim, and I'm sure praying, that they hope this could be the start of regime change and that this regime over 40 years now will ultimately be overthrown.
Chris, Benny Gantz's ultimatum to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shows major conflict within his war cabinet. What could possibly happen if members of his cabinet leave in the middle of the war?
Well, as we said in the report, the coalition can remain. The reason is that they have 64 seats without Gantz's party, and so the coalition will remain. The war cabinet would have to shift. There's three main members. That would be all four. There is General Eisenkot, Yoav Gallant, Netanyahu, and Gantz. So that would change the complexion of the war cabinet. So some believe that Gantz was really in league with the Biden administration to try to overthrow the coalition and Netanyahu's government and actually include at least part of the Palestinian Authority in place in the Gaza Strip after the war with Hamas. And that's why Netanyahu is so forcefully against that. And so we'll see what happens. It might energize some of the opposition to Netanyahu, but right now it looks like it's strong enough to remain.
One of the biggest questions right now are what is the latest developments with Israel moving further into Rafah?
Well, it seems like the rescue of the bodies that we had in our report and the discovery of this video of this 8-year-old girl may have come from Rafah. They haven't announced that specifically, but they have been uncovering more tunnels and tunnel shafts, at least 50 tunnels into Egypt. Now, from this would be, it is an embarrassment to the Egyptian government, obviously complicit in much of the smuggling that goes on between Egypt and Gaza, supplying, Hamas with much of its ammunition and weapons. And there's a possibility, some believe, some of the hostages could have been taken out of those smuggling tunnels into Egypt and even some of the leaders of Hamas.
Chris, what are you hearing from those in Israel after Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's speech rebuking Biden for curbing weapons?
Well, during that speech, she got a standing ovation. The Knesset speaker, who probably invited her, described her as a brave leader who spoke truth to power and brought justice to the academic ivory tower. That's in reference to the grilling she had for many of those heads of the colleges there. Another one said the congresswoman proved herself a great friend of Israel. So they really appreciated her speaking and someone to keep an eye on because she's a possible choice as a candidate for vice president for President Trump.
Indeed, she is. Christian is reporting for us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. Coming off, a new report says Hamas inflated the number of its fatalities. Was this the fog of war or terrorist propaganda? We're going to explore that question when we come back. You're watching CNN Newswatch. Stay with us.
What's your credit card debt balance? If it's $10,000 or more, here are 3 easy solutions you can start implementing today. And number 3 is an absolute game changer. Number 1, the first step to tackling your credit card debt is understanding how much debt you actually have and how long it could follow you around for if you're only making minimum payments or have fallen behind. Minimum payments could